Welcome and thank you for joining us here this evening for the University of New Mexico's second Community Engaged Research Lecture and Award presentation. I'm Craig White, the acting provost of the university. Tonight serves as an opportunity for the University of New Mexico to demonstrate the high value it places on community engaged scholarship, which captures research that engages faculty in academically relevant work that simultaneously meets both the UNM mission and goals, as well as community goals and priorities. This award recognizes exceptional scholarly work that embodies UNM's commitment to community engagement and deeply and thoroughly affects the relationship between the university and the larger community in a positive and meaningful way. Tonight we celebrate the significant achievements of Dr. Claudia Isaac, Associate Professor of Community and Regional Planning at the School of Architecture and Planning, and Vice Chair of the Institutional Review Board. As part of tonight's program, we'll get an opportunity to get a glimpse of Dr. Isaac's significant contributions and then present her with the university's highest honor for community engaged scholarship. We look forward to her lecture on community-based planning, co-creating knowledge and action. I would now like to welcome to the stage Dr. Renya Ehrenfeucht, Director of Community and Regional Planning, to introduce our lecturer this evening. Thank you.
Well, thank you. Thank you, everyone, for coming, and thank you, Provost White. And good evening, everyone. Welcome to the School of Architecture and Planning. My name is Renya Ehrenfeucht, and I am the Director of the Community and Regional Planning Program. And it is really, truly an honor to have the opportunity to introduce my colleague and friend, Dr. Claudia Isaac. Dr. Isaac is an Associate Professor in the Community and Regional Planning Program. And we're here to recognize her numerous contributions in the area of community engaged scholarship. And indeed, she has spent numerous years working on engaged research, and research that specifically builds collaborative environments, working to create both different kinds of work environments and organizations organizations where everyone both learns and builds knowledge. This becomes the basis for action and also the basis for further learning and further knowledge generation, really kind of embracing what community engaged work and research does. Dr. Isaac draws on her interdisciplinary experience in her work. She majored in psychology when she earned a BA from Bryn Mawr College. She actually has 2 master's degrees, one in public and international affairs, and a second in urban and regional planning from Princeton University. And she earned her PhD in urban planning from the University of California, Los Angeles. Over the years, many people have asked me what planning is. They say, what is urban planning? What is community planning? And what comes to mind is a public meeting they were at once, a large development project. Right now, everybody says Albuquerque Rapid Transit, a project going on along Central. But planning is really so much more than that. You know, what it is really basically is it's people envisioning alternative futures and working towards those goals. And Dr. Isaac's collaborations in numerous interconnected areas. Recently, she's been working in housing, community economic development, and food sovereignty and food security, reflect the priority of numerous people and numerous organizations who are really leading the struggles for stronger and more secure communities. And her scholarship spans collaborative planning, evaluation research, and technical analyses and organizational analysis. It has resulted in over 50 reports, publications, technical documents, and plans with a broad base of partners. And just a few of these partners: Sawmill Community Land Trust, the Historic Neighborhoods Alliance, La Cosecha CSA, or Community Supported Agriculture, the Albuquerque Affordable Housing Coalition. And as I was thinking about organizations she has worked with, I really hesitated because I thought, you know, how to choose a few of so many impressive organizations who are really leading planning, kind of leading our visions of the future and visions for change. But her work has also been recognized by national agencies and philanthropic organizations. It's been funded by the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation, by the Kellogg Foundation, by the National Trust for Historic Preservation, but as well as from many organizations locally and local public agencies as well, and local governments. And of course they do this because they also value the work and value what comes from it. And anyone who knows Dr. Isaac knows that she does work in evaluation research. She does do collaborative planning, but her work extends so far beyond that. And she takes her scholarship into direct action, into policy, into advocacy work. And she uses it directly to affect change. Just as one example of this is that she has worked successfully to try to develop mechanisms for more funding for affordable housing, and really worked closely to develop Albuquerque's Workforce Housing Trust Fund. But so she both used her scholarship to help show the need for this, but also the opportunity for more affordable housing, but also then to evaluate the effectiveness of it and use that as a basis for future action. And that really kind of reflects this iterative process that has characterized her work. But I also do want to note that she also brings her iterative collaborative practice into the classroom, and she has been recognized for her excellence in teaching on more than one occasion. She has been recognized as an outstanding faculty member on multiple occasions here at UNM, and as an engaged colleague in the Community and Regional Planning program in this school. At this university, she's held many different roles. And again, I'll just name a few. She was the director of the Community and Regional Planning program. She also has been the director of Latin American Studies. She helped coordinate a dual master's program, between these two areas. And also, she is currently the vice chair of the university's Institutional Review Board, and that's the board that kind of oversees evaluations on human subjects research, or in other words, the people in research. And I think this also just reflects yet another way that Dr. Isaac also works in the university to ensure that research in all its forms are ethical, and that really it's serving people and serving society well, which we would hope is the objective of all research and not only community-engaged scholarship. But I will say, as impressive as Dr. Isaac's career has been, I know that none of us are here to listen to me talk about her, but instead, we are here to listen to her discuss community-based planning, co-creating knowledge and action. And so I want to just say again, congratulations on a well-deserved honor of receiving UNM's Community Engaged Research Award. And then I invite Dr. Isaac up forward.
Thank you, Provost White and Professor Ehrenreich, for that gracious introduction. I am very honored to be receiving this award. Oops, I guess I should turn on the PowerPoint so you don't have to look at my cat. Here we go. He's a lovely cat. I want to thank Professor Ehrenreich for nominating me this year, and to thank Associate Dean Childs and Dean Forbes for their nominations in past years. I'd also like to thank Vice President Lopez and the University Research Committee for honoring me today, and those are fabulous flowers. I especially want to thank my colleagues here in George Pearl Hall. The Community and Regional Planning program and the School of Architecture and Planning welcomed me and my commitment to community-based planning from the moment that I arrived. It is in many ways because of that support that I've been able to chart this course with community-engaged research within UNM. I want to start with a few thoughts about my philosophy and approach. I ground my research in a mission of poverty alleviation through community capacity building. I believe that effective community-based and community-sensitive development requires identification, enhancement, and utilization of existing community assets, including financial, social, natural, human, physical, cultural, and political capital. Community-engaged research allows me to contribute to positive social transformation by sharing my scholarly and professional expertise with communities and community-based organizations that seek to protect their own well-being, increase their ability to solve their own problems, and so to increase their collective self-determination. I'm tilting to the light. Research in community-based planning requires engagement with community partners in community building, that is, community organization and social justice advocacy. In organization building, advancing the learning capacity of community-based organizations, and asset-based knowledge creation, increasing a community's ability to take initiative in making adjustments for improved performance. I have expertise in 4 methodologies that I can bring to community research teams. These include participatory empowerment evaluation, community education and training, asset-based community development, economic development, and policy advocacy and community organizing. In a moment, I will talk about some of my team-based experiences in using those methodologies, and hopefully elucidate some common themes and lessons that inform community-engaged research in general. But first, I want to share the history of participatory planning and research as a co-creative, collaborative endeavor. That history does not start well. The Adinkra Asante symbol, Neo Ope Se Obedihene, he who wants to be king, rather sums it up. Luckily, the story's end is much, much better. But we start with the White City. Daniel Burnham and the other designers of the 1893 Chicago World's Fair called the exposition the White City, and they used that term without irony. The vision of this seminal moment in the history of planning was the white plastered neoclassical design of its buildings. Metaphorically, the White City also expressed a vision of the beautiful Western European place that seeks to bring what was seen as an increasingly disorganized urban space into a utopian social order, where everyone behaved as people of quality taught them that they should behave. The architecture itself was seen as a civilizing influence and became the model for Beaux-Arts planning. Robert Rydell points out that even at the time of the fair, women and African Americans challenged the White City vision, sparking Ida B. Wells to urge African Americans to boycott the fair. Civil rights and feminist activists argued that the Europhilic tone of the fair understated their contributions to American progress and denied an inclusive expression of the progressive city favored by those activists, one that emphasized emancipation, democratization, and full access to civic life. With some negotiation, Frederick Douglass managed to persuade the all-white exposition committee to create a colored day. They also included other ethnic European immigrant days at the exposition. It was too little, too late. This inception of planning practice and scholarship as an official self-defined discipline, and if you ask planners, when did planning start as a profession, they'll say the 1893 Chicago World's Fair. So this is an important moment, and it's embodied in the White City. There's a problem there. It set the stage for elitist, patronizing, and colonizing approaches to planning into the next 3 decades. Exemplified in what John Friedman has named the social reform paradigm, the White City taught to tame the people of color, immigrants, poor people, and women increasingly present in U.S. cities through an effectively colonizing practice. So the foundational myth of the White City is that the good city is European and elite and wealthy, and so should be planned by elite, wealthy people of European ancestry, Western, Northern European ancestries, who know what that looks like and can teach the rest of us what to do. The New Deal, World War II, and the Pax Americana of the 1950s brought a period of great faith in the technocratic potential of planning to solve humanity's geospatial, social, and economic problems. Learning from advances in statistical analysis and large-scale economic and sociological modeling, planning was to be essentially a research endeavor. Planners were charged with identifying, through statistical analysis, deficits in communities, and to using newly engaged tools, such as Keynesian economic tools, to target social investment where it was needed most, or where it would improve urban economies most. Andres Faludi laid out the fundamental principles of rational comprehensive planning embodied in this period, arguing that, and this is a quote, optimization is the core of rational planning, based on principles of efficiency and on fairness through systematic and data-driven decision-making. Rational comprehensive planning represented an important move forward in the way in which planners at the time considered research. Big data was seen as a challenge to what was perceived as, and I agree, the self-referential white city planners and their professional descendants. Rational comprehensive planning was posited as a way to ensure that the needs of hidden populations, underserved communities, etc., were addressed in plans. The sophisticated research basis for this decision-making was, by necessity, an elite practice. Most people don't know how to do complex econometric analysis or sophisticated predictive modeling. The civil engineering in the rational and comprehensive city is complex and requires advanced learning. Planning was seen to need disinterested researchers who knew how to use the facts to generate rational, disinterested policy that would therefore serve the unilateral and uniform public interest. This generation of neutral evidence was the way that cities were to become fair and just in their allocation of amenities and opportunities. Rational comprehensive is still then very much a top-down management-driven practice. In the search for a monolithically rational solution to planning problems, you rely on the poorly educated or trained population to say, thank you very much for meeting our needs. In rational comprehensive planning, then, opposition to such a fair and research-driven plan must, by extension, come from self-interested, private, special interest sectors, seeking to maximize their own well-being at the expense of the optimized public interest. A political critique of these plans, modernist plans as they were, or as James Scott has named it, authoritarian high modernist plans, is easily dismissed as ill-informed or selfish. So the foundational myth here is that planners are like Ian Scholl's Dr. Science. Planners know more than you do. But the poster child for the failure of the modernist plan is urban renewal. As Jane Jacobs eloquently noted, this panoptic, overarching view of the rational comprehensive planner, and for that matter, the white city planner, missed a lot about how cities, especially poor communities in cities, actually function. In Albuquerque, the testament of the destruction of the Alvarado Hotel, a bit too modern perhaps, not modern enough, sorry, and the parking lot where the original Congregation Albert Synagogue used to be on West Gold Street, are the fruits of urban renewal here. So what do these two foundational myths miss? Communities are like the TARDIS. They're bigger on the inside. And I know, I put that slide in because I really like the TARDIS. I could have said it differently, but I didn't. These foundational myths still prevail in many planning arenas. They have, however, been countered by planners within and without the profession, and without the academy, who seek to deepen their understanding of the specific conditions and needs and goals of communities of people by, go figure, learning from people about their own communities. The richness of social capital, social norms of reciprocity, sharing economies, eyes on the street approaches to public safety are not very visible from outside the TARDIS. From outside the TARDIS, you can't see the swimming pool. I'm glad that there are a couple of Doctor Who folks here. Otherwise, that joke just falls right flat. The TARDIS has a swimming pool in it. Okay. So in the 1960s, social activists, both from within the planning profession and the planning academy, particularly MIT, began to rethink the centralized and centralist principles that underlie these foundational myths. Understanding that a singular and monolithic public policy is more likely to fragment and exclude populations than optimize their planning outcomes, theorists such as Paul Davidoff proposed a practice of advocacy planning. This is another critical moment in scholarship about planning, and so I think it's worth a long quote from his 1965 article. City planning is a means for determining policy. Appropriate policy in a democracy is determined through political debate. The right course of action is always a matter of choice, never of fact. Intelligent choice about public policy would be aided if different political, social, and economic interests produced city plans. Politicizing the planning process requires that the planning function be located either in executive or legislative branches, and the scope of planning be broadened to include all areas of interest to the public. This is an admirable response to the myth of the neutral public servant serving a singular public interest using neutral and incontrovertible scientific evidence. The advocacy movement recognized that the claim of neutrality was too easy a mask for self-interest of planners themselves, and that standard evidence-based practice misses a lot of evidence. While advocacy planning challenged the certainty of rational comprehensive planners, inevitably, though, the planners who actually created those early plural plans were experts themselves, working in government bureaucracies, and the eventual arbiter of which plan best serves a singular public interest is a government-appointed planning commission. This created an uneasy position of community members as public supplicants for planning responses to their needs and goals. At about the same time that advocacy planning was gaining traction, planners and community activists began to look at collaborative learning and decision-making in contemporary social movements as a basis for planning. Some drew on the pragmatism of John Dewey and the concept of social learning. Others drew on the critical pedagogy of Paulo Freire, and still others drew on theories of community organizing and communication. These planners and activists began to insist on decentering centralized planning decision-making. These planners and activists also decentered the city, enabling small towns, rural and tribal places to center themselves in planning processes. Leonie Sandercock has described this movement as insurgent planning historiography. The organizations shown here are exemplars of community-based co-creation of planning knowledge in the service of generating community-based action. Because remember, decentered planning not only democratizes knowledge creation, it also creates a reflective practice that enables effective community action. This decentering does not exclude the academic or professional planner. Indeed, the Right to the City movement Right to the City movement got its basis in the theoretical work of academic geographer David Harvey, and used that work to operationalize their anti-gentrification and other access movements nationally and internationally. Okay. Policy Link's development of the Equity Manifesto derived from a collaboration of professionals, academics, and community activists. Strategic Action for a Just Economy helped to generate the equitable development movement out of reflective analysis within on-the-ground movements to ensure that development policy and practice meets the needs of disinvested communities. The National Low-Income Housing Coalition often works with the Joint Center for Housing Policy, based at Harvard and MIT, to generate movement-based research. These are just a few of the national organizations engaged in this form of community-engaged research, decentered research, where academics and professionals contribute substantially, but not from the center of the work. So, the locations for engaging in decentered research include community-based organizations, nonprofit organizations, government agencies, and I love Nikos Poulantzas' discussion of guerrillas in the bureaucracy. Even the most difficult bureaucracy, you can find an agency, a staff, and I'm looking at some of them, I won't point you out, who are doing the good work. Political and organizing projects, and indeed, community-engaged academic units, which I'm delighted to see are flourishing here at UNM. These are folks I've worked with over the years. In the spirit of community-based participatory research, of course, none of the work that I'm talking about is my own. It's all decentered. I've probably missed many of the organizations and their members, or you guys don't have a logo that I can cut and paste out of a website. I've also had the pleasure of working with faculty and student colleagues who are equally committed to decentered, community-based research. I won't have time today to talk about all that I have learned from these experiences or all of the organizations themselves. But meanwhile, could I ask that all of the academic, faculty, student, and most important, community organization and government agency folks that I've worked with in this work, would you mind waving your hands or standing up and being acknowledged? Thank you so much. One way to decenter community-engaged research and planning is to reject the academic language in which it's often framed. This is very difficult for me to do. I am indeed an academic. So, I have chosen to represent some of the concepts that I'll be talking about today through the rest of this lecture using the Adinkra visual language based in the Asante language. This language from the Akan community of what is now Ghana represents creative and resonant ways in which communities can communicate norms, values, mutual support systems, and analysis. I do this at the risk of appropriation. I have no direct experience with Asante language or Adinkras, but my ancestors may have. And I find that these images and their meanings resonate with my own family's experiences of colonization, diaspora, and most important, resistance. The Aya Adinkra here translates to resourcefulness, and is, I think, a great representation of community-based planning research. My evaluation practice is grounded in the principles of empowerment evaluation, reflective practice, the learning organization, participatory action research, and critical ethnography. I think that Mate Masi, the Adinkra symbol for wisdom and knowledge, embodies that practice very well. Because participatory empowerment evaluation enables organizations, agencies, and their constituents to analyze the actual outcomes and impacts of their work and make research-based decisions about their own strategic directions and actions. Challenging the notion that the academy is the only legitimate source of rigorous evidence on which to base practice, participatory empowerment planning evaluation seeks to break down the constructed binary opposition between research and practice and generates new knowledge in the form of practice-based evidence. I want to give an example of an effort by the American Friends Service Committee, the La Cosecha CSA, and the Agricultura Network, extending from 2009. From 2009 to 2012, the AFSC of New Mexico hired me as the external evaluator on their USDA-funded farmer training and cooperative development project. AFSC New Mexico focuses a good deal of its work on food systems transformation, decolonization, sovereignty, and security. It does this in ongoing partnership with community-based organizations, in this project first in Bernalillo County, South Valley, and later in Anthony, Española, and Jemez Pueblo. These communities share a rich agricultural history, strong agricultural knowledge and traditions, but currently suffer from food insecurity. The collaborative process in this earliest iteration of this work involved quarterly meetings with trainees, farmer trainers, farm managers, and organizational partners, which created opportunities for AFSC to adjust the farmer training model as they moved forward. So it was an ongoing monitoring process. And as they expanded to a statewide network of training from 2012 to the present, this learning process continued. I shared evaluation data with the U.S. Department of Agriculture's Whole Measures evaluation effort, which helped them to compile project-level evaluation findings at the national level. The 2010 AFSC evaluation report was distributed broadly within the food systems community and made available to AFSC partners in the movement. AFSC staff members and organizational partners report that the deliberative process that I facilitated helped them to analyze and reshape their working relationships with each other, recognizing that community partnerships are difficult and process is really useful, and having that experience of that process was replicable sometimes. The evaluation also helped them to increase their ability to bring young farmers into the South Valley agricultural economy. I'm also told that some of this process work helped to frame the decision by farmers in the Agricultura network to form a cooperative and shift from the LLC that they had developed initially out of this farmer training, well, a lot of their food systems work, of which the farmer training was part. The Agricultura network also developed the La Cosecha CSA, which provides subsidized weekly food boxes or bags to residents of the South Valley and elsewhere in Albuquerque. This project responded directly to those earlier evaluation findings, where we learned that though farmer trainees experienced substantial increases in their household income and employment stability, that income was made mostly through sales to expensive farmers markets and restaurants and did not serve their home communities. La Cosecha is funded in part by grants, including the Kellogg Foundation, other foundations, I believe McCune Foundation, as well as by community-based organizations who collaborate with La Cosecha to fund subsidized memberships among their constituencies, and to some extent by contributions of full-pay members to the CSA. In 2015, La Cosecha asked me to be their external evaluator. That engagement has helped me to work with them in a team. It's decentered research. All of the staff work with my team of students and me on this project. We developed a graphic representation of their theory of change, that is how their activities are intended to achieve social transformative goals. Their logic model, that is the rigorous mechanism for assessing their progress towards those goals, their actual outcomes. These products help La Cosecha reflect on how their learning from this innovative practice can be elevated to inform evidence for other organizations through formal and informal dissemination. Asset-based community economic development I have expressed here with Denkyem, the Adinkra symbol for adaptability. Community-based planning relies on effective and sustainable community institutions that represent community voice and implement community initiatives. Communities often find it difficult to build on their local expertise and skills because they lack the organizational framework to carry out complex programs and initiatives over an extended time frame. A good deal of my community-engaged team research has been with organizations doing strategic planning and asset-based development planning. This work involves collectively identifying local resources at a community's disposal and designing the appropriate organizational structures to mobilize and enhance those resources to enable community-driven economic development. This work is complicated by the fact that organizations seeking to challenge and overturn the social hierarchies and social inequities that keep them in poverty are often compelled to enact organizational structures and strategies that replicate those same inequalities. I draw on the concepts of local knowledge from Clifford Geertz and the multiple ways of knowing from Belenky as tools to contribute to organizations as they develop structures that value and utilize all participants' contributions and help build long-lasting, effective community-based organizations. We can think of this community-based asset-building process in two ways. The first is building diagnostic capacity, which enables collective analysis and understanding. This practice is collaborative. Everybody in the process has something to contribute. It's based in local expertise. It's both experiential and formal. Let's not assume that academics are the only ones with a formal education. It can also be used to identify organizational, economic, and political capacity available to community members for developing resources and responding to challenges. The second part of this is building adaptive capacity, which enables collective response. It's attuned to external conditions, constraints, and opportunities. It utilizes networks. It's enabled through inquisitive and innovative thinking, and it's sovereign. It is controlled and driven by community goals, needs, and resources. The example that I'd like to share with you is the New Mexico Main Street effort, capacity building effort, and the New Mexico Resiliency Alliance development out of that effort. In 2011, the New Mexico Main Street program, which is a division of the New Mexico State Economic Development Department, sought to engage in a collective analysis with their staff and associates to review and refine their approach to community capacity building through technical and financial assistance to local Main Street organizations. They convened a task force to explore ways to enhance the capacity of local Main Street organizations through this assistance and invited me to facilitate their collective analysis. The team had been frustrated by some instability and the uneven ability of local Main Street organizations to receive the technical assistance that they had to offer, and sought to refine their own practices in order to address this problem. The capacity building initiative had 3 phases. The first phase involved collective analysis by the New Mexico Main Street team of their current technical assistance practices, what was working, what was not working, and why. Phase 2 involved identifying concrete strategies It's right here in front of me. Phase 2 involved identifying concrete strategies for improving their technical assistance approach, including an analytical brief. Phase 3 involved reaching out to the team's partners and constituents to design a coordinated strategy to support local economic development in New Mexico's small, rural, and underserved communities. We wrote a large number of meeting summaries and analytical briefs and flip charts to synthesize the analytical insights generated in the facilitated meetings. We also looked at the insights from literatures on asset-based development and adaptive capacity building to inform the group's discussions. The project led to several procedural and institutional changes in Main Street's technical and material assistance delivery, and led to the establishment of the New Mexico Resiliency Alliance, a nonprofit organization of which I'm a founding member. Wasn't my idea, but I get to claim being a founding member. We formed the alliance to mobilize funding from large funders who would be reluctant to grant directly to small community-based economic development organizations in New Mexico's small towns. They simply didn't have the track record. In collaboration with New Mexico Main Street, the Alliance received initial funding from the McCune Foundation to make small capacity building grants to Main Street local organizations. In less than 1 year, we achieved our 501c3 IRS status. And that's like, I didn't do this. Others in the team did this, but that's like pretty remarkable. We dispersed $40,000 in that first year of McCune funding to small capacity building grants, including organizational infrastructure support, physical infrastructure and other capital improvement grants, and professional development grants to improve the capacity of local residents to design their own community economic development strategies. The New Mexico Resiliency Alliance has just completed its first grant cycle for non-Main Street community-based organizations with similar capacity constraints. So out of that capacity building initiative has evolved, in addition to the changes within Main Street, has evolved an important and new, and I think pretty innovative, approach to funding economic development in a decentered way in New Mexico. An asset-based approach to community capacity building requires not only assessing the existing human, social, natural, and physical capital that low-income communities can leverage to increase their economic stability, but also in identifying gaps in knowledge and analysis that create barriers to mobilizing and utilizing those community assets. My approach to community education draws on Freire's principles of knowledge generation that builds on current strengths, convenes environments for collaborative learning, and guides community members through data collection, analysis, and decision-making, and of course, in the end, civic action. The concept of meaningful community participation is rooted in the communication theory of Jürgen Habermas and the deliberative policy planning theory of John Forrester. Meaningful community participation requires systems of communicative action that enable deliberative discourse to ensure fair, productive, and reasoned public dialogue to inform public policy decisions. The example that I want to give of this practice is sector planning in the International District. In 2009, the Southeast Heights Health Coalition, now called the International District Healthy Communities Coalition, approached St. Joseph's Community Health Foundation to fund training in the planning tools available to ensure that metropolitan revitalization planning happening within their community didn't exclude current community residents and address serious ongoing deterioration in social determinants of health within the community. They received the funding and invited me to develop a training of trainers program. I invited my friend Moises Gonzalez to join the team, as well as some students. I asked Moises to join me because I don't have the expertise in land use planning that Moises has. And again, this is a collaborative, interdisciplinary process. Ray Garduño, then the city councilor for the Southeast Heights, had indicated a willingness to initiate a sector or neighborhood planning process for the community. We convened a curriculum development committee comprised of neighborhood association presidents, the director of a local community health agency, my team, and the city councilor staff. The committee designed curriculum and materials for coalition members to use in the broader community. We conducted a 2-day training of trainers session for coalition members so that they could conduct sector planning house parties in advance of the city planning department's initiation of the official public planning process. Community members wanted to be knowledgeable not only about planning jargon, but also to understand the underlying theoretical informants of city planning practices that were already happening in their neighborhood. They didn't just want to understand what those practices were, they wanted to understand the theory that underlay those practices. Our conversations led to a collective analysis of how redevelopment practices have promoted destination commercial development along Central Avenue without necessarily addressing the following public health concerns: food insecurity, a built environment that promotes crime, high rates of pedestrian accidents, social disconnection and a lack of open space, and a weak economic development infrastructure for affordable commercial activities that could serve local residents. We developed a sector planning workbook, a house party presentation, a script for coalition members to use, several land use games, Those were Moises's. They were really cool, though. Community members could play them with other community members, and they could figure out what was going to work, what wasn't going to work. They could move things around. It was really fun. We also put together a land use Jeopardy game that community members, the coalition members, used this themselves, and then also made it available to community members so that they could quiz themselves on social determinants of health, sector planning, and general planning language. The International District Sector Development Plan process was suspended when the city of Albuquerque shifted to an integrated development ordinance approach to neighborhood planning. That process is currently in process. The coalition remains an active participant in that process, particularly geared towards ensuring that the health and land use policies embodied in their draft sector plan that was never adopted because of the IDO, but that those policies and practices get incorporated into the IDO. I'm told that the house parties weren't implemented as planned, but the materials we produced continued to be used by coalition members. And the workbook has also been used by what was then Bernalillo County Place Matters, and I believe is now Health Matters New Mexico. Did I get that right? It's got a new name now. As a basis for developing a county-wide land use toolkit on social determinants of health for community-based planning activists. Policy advocacy and organizing. The purpose of all of this work is transformation, and so the Adinkra symbol, Sesa wo Suban, for transformation is the symbol that I've used here. The social movement component of my work is inspired by the work of Renato Rosaldo, who in writing about social uses of ethnography argues that no strict distinction ever exists between ethnographer and his or her subjects. He notes that the complexity of relationships between ethnographer, subject, and audience requires a challenge of the social critic to assess his or her own subject position in relation to social power structures and to engage those power structures in an active way. Rosaldo's conception obviously extends beyond the discipline of anthropology and provides a basis for planning academics to engage in what Kemmis and McTaggart call scholarly civic engagement. As Dr. Ehrenfeucht noted, part of this work that I've done is with the Albuquerque Affordable Housing Coalition around workforce housing funds. If community scholarship is to contribute to positive social transformation, then community-engaged scholars must be public intellectuals, defined by Henry Giraud as scholars who not only operate within civil society, but challenge their students and community partners to be informed and engaged critical citizens. This is particularly important in the field of community planning, where planning scholarship is called upon to inform policy decisions, empower and enable community-based decision-making, and to chart a path towards improved social, natural, and built environments. So the example that I want to share with you, it's the last one, so it's okay, is the Workforce Housing Opportunity Act and the Albuquerque Affordable Housing Coalition's advocacy for the Workforce Housing Trust Fund. Since passing the first general obligation bond for the Workforce Housing Trust Fund in 2007 for $10 million over 2 years, the AAHC has worked in the advocacy arena to promote ongoing funding for the fund. In recent rounds of the general obligation bonds, the administration's allocation for the trust fund was cut in 2015 to $1.25 million and in 2017 to $2 million. The arguments for this cut stemmed from a shift by the current mayoral administration to development through the recruitment of a new creative class, residents whose increased economic activity is intended to increase the city's gross municipal product and reap positive outcomes for all residents. The members of the AAHC have a different analysis, arguing that a disaggregated look at the actual benefits of amenity creation have demonstrated minimal positive impact on low-income residents. In contrast, direct investment in workforce housing creation has been shown not only to generate substantial positive outcomes for low-income residents, but also created productive economic multipliers for an economy still struggling to recover from recession. This was truly a collective effort. One of the things that I contributed to it in 2015 was a research-based letter to the City Council Finance Committee laying out an empirically substantiated and needs-driven economic development argument for increased allocations for workforce housing. In both cycles, AAHC letters and City Council public comments enabled partial restoration of the funding with strong support from some city councilors. The AAHC considers these campaigns a success, even though we didn't get back up to, we're looking for 5% of the general obligation bond over the next 5 bond cycles. Haven't gotten there yet. But we consider this a success in rigorous public scholarship shaping policy that has a direct impact on the lives of people often ignored or misunderstood in policy debates. Boa me na me moa wo. Cooperation and interdependence. In conclusion, I hope that these examples demonstrate how academic, professional, and community-based scholars can collaborate through engaged pedagogy to generate new knowledge and inform community-centric action. What I find most gratifying about participating in community-engaged research is the ability to see, over time, the building of capacity, the expressions of resiliency and resourcefulness, and real successes in generating positive social justice outcomes. So what has this community-based research taught me over the years? I've learned that community-engaged research involves a partnership between communities and academics, which must be real, effective, and equal, and must avoid what I call the cult of expertise. I know more than you do. A core value in community-engaged research is reciprocity and collaborative knowledge creation. In this approach, all partners are co-researchers and scholars. And so we need to be clear that all partners own the findings and that communities have sovereignty over their own knowledge products. I've learned that decentering the planning academic from a process really matters in socially transformative research. The purpose of community-engaged research is problem solving and information sharing to improve practice in this community, in the future, and in other communities facing similar issues. In each of the examples I've talked about, thoughtful and committed community activists convened themselves to understand the causes and characteristics of their own communities and their own community problems, to develop strategic solutions to that shared problem, and to utilize tools generated by themselves, perhaps in consultation with professionals, academics, and other community-based planning actors, to restore control over their own present and future lives, building their own transformative capacity. I've learned that decentered research requires humility on my part, and I'm an academic. That doesn't come easily. Yes, I bring a set of academic tools, methods, and areas of expertise, but those never drive the discourse. We academics get in trouble when we assume that we're all that. I've learned that representation and dissemination in community-engaged research is often informal, certainly not often in traditional academic dissemination. I sometimes call it the scholarship of the banal, certainly not because the content is in any way banal, but because it's disseminated in the most mundane forms: meeting notes, flip chart charts, tables, funder reports, bylaws, campaign debriefs, word of mouth. These are, in fact, the primary means of communication and communicative action in community-based knowledge sharing. I've learned that communities are complicated, structurally unequal, and so often the site of oppression. I think of this caution often and recognize that I bring my own social values and principles to the community research table and work with organizations who align with my values and principles. I have learned that I am not a rational comprehensive planner. I am not a neutral and objective public servant, nor am I a distanced objective researcher, and I do not aspire to be any of those things. Thank you. I'm not even going to try to pronounce that Adinkra, but it stands for democracy and unity. I have the honor and pleasure to work with astounding community professional, student, and academic scholars who, with their insight, analysis, and action orientation, continually enrich my life. These people are driving impressive movements for social justice and transformation in their communities, the nation, and beyond. This is their research award. I humbly share it with them. Thank you very much. Oh, and I didn't go over time, so there's time for questions. Are there any questions or comments or other community-engaged research that you'd like to share? Yes, Nancy?
So I love how you talked about the role of self-reflexivity about one's own location and systems of privilege as one of the seeds for transformation. I was wondering if you could talk or maybe give an example that illustrates that.
Okay. I'm going to repeat the question for the video. In talking about self-reflection and my own location, or our own location as academics in this process, is there an example, or can I talk about that a little bit more? You said it much more eloquently than I did. I think about it all the time, and I've found that there are some circumstances in which, in my interest in being completely community-based, I shy away from bringing insight or ideas or thoughts that I might actually have that can contribute to the conversation, that I have decentered myself completely out of the conversation. And I think part of that, and I'm trying to think of specific examples that aren't embarrassing. Well, they're all embarrassing. I think that part of this is recognizing that it's possible to be humble and informative at the same time, but it's also true, I have tenure at a major research university. I can do things and say things that other people are put in a highly vulnerable position if they do and say. Okay, I'm not going to name the actual event. It was a public education event. I felt that I was being obstructed by certain forces within the political environment, and I got a call from a journalist, and like an idiot, I sort of laid out everything I thought about, and I didn't think, I should have thought about the people I was working with, including some who were working within those structures, and were being great Gettyas in the bureaucracy, and I outed them. That was a really, really big mistake. And I hope I've learned from it, and I hope, well, luckily people still seem to like me, so they must have at least forgiven me a little bit. Power can be expressed in really complicated and subtle ways. And recognizing it's not enough to say, well, community members have power. Well, we know, I talk about, Kreutzmann and McKnight talks about partially accessible assets and inaccessible assets and those assets that are controlled by the community. But I add a fourth, and that's imperial assets. Those are assets being used by people who are not you, not within your community, who are trying to undermine what you're trying to do, trying to undermine your very existence in some cases. And I must say, in the current political moment, well, enough said. And so figuring out how to use that power that I have of, you guys can't fire me? Well, I guess you could, but I'm hoping you're not going to be able to say things from within this safe space that may not be able to be said on the ground, I think is an important recognition of power and a determination to use the power for good and not for evil. Yes. Hi, Louise.
It seems one of the things that goes on is there's a lot of shifting of stuff. I mean, not getting so used to having a product, like a journal article or a book or something, that it's theirs and it's done, right? But it does seem in working in this collaborative context that you may start something and it doesn't turn out, like you were saying, the house parties never got done, or the milieu shifts and the organization disappears and another one reappears. Do you find that frustrating? Do you still see a lot of progress? Do you feel like things are changing at all in Albuquerque?
Okay, got to say the question and then I'll.
Yeah, all right.
But the answer is yes, I do see things changing in Albuquerque. So that's okay. The question was, there seems to be a shifting process. Organizations change, membership in organizations change. Something that you've worked a lot of time on may not work out, or it starts and then it generates something else that you're not involved in. And the question was, do I find that frustrating? And do I see any change in Albuquerque? And yes, I see enormous community-based, community-driven transformation in Albuquerque. I've been here for 28 years, and ART aside, I think that it's actually going in a pretty good direction. That the grassroots is, in fact, enormously mobilized and active and effective here. I was talking to somebody who moved here from New York and was saying, here you actually call a city councilor and they answer your, that doesn't happen in Manhattan. Didn't happen in Los Angeles, I tried. The fluidity, though, I think we can embrace it or we can become frustrated by it. And last year, and I wanted to say I'm really delighted that the first recipient of the Community Engaged Research Award, Nina Wallerstein, is here. I am very honored to be in your company. Thank you. And you came up because last year in your talk, you talked about the process in many ways being the product. If we embrace that and stop trying to put like a pin in it and say it's done, we can write it up. I've often been asked, why don't I just write some journal articles about this? Well, because it's not done, and it's probably never going to be done. And anyway, I enjoy my time doing the actual engaged work more than writing the articles. But I think the better reason is that it's not done. This is an ongoing and iterative process, and the best we can do is assess the benchmarks that we've reached. One of the things I like about evaluation reports is that they're a moment in time. They don't say, this is everything that this organization has done, will ever do, punto, they can close their doors. It says, this is the trajectory that they're on, this is what they've accomplished in this last time period, and here's some things that they may want to adjust as they move forward into the future. I really like that about the work that we do, but it doesn't get me a lot of published journal articles. Yes, Rick.
Claudia,
the question was, where do I see my work moving from here? And I'd say same old, as long as my arthritis doesn't make it impossible. I like the work that I do. I love the people that I'm working with. I love the fact that people are asking me to do stuff that I don't, go out. In fact, I think since you invited me to join the Pocket of Poverty Alliance team, I don't think I've actually asked to do anything. People have asked me to do them, and I'm really proud of that. And as long as people keep asking, it means that I probably haven't gotten too old to do the work, and I'm finding that the work in food systems is really fascinating, and particularly the ability to use this community-based research approach to challenge, not just to challenge the industrial food system, but to see food systems decolonizing as a decolonizing activity. And there are some parts of the food system movement that sort of talk about creating a new food system. Well, the folks that I work with say that this isn't new. This used to be what we were able to do before we were colonized, and then now we're trying to restore that food system from the industrial food system. So I think that that's something that I'm hoping that people keep asking me to work on, because I find it really fascinating. But there's other stuff too, and I really love being on the Resiliency Alliance board. And yes, Jennifer.
I wonder if you could reflect on the institutional context in which you're doing your work. I think the award signifies a growing recognition amongst academic circles of this form of decentered knowledge production. I wonder if you could reflect a little bit on what it took to get here for those of us who are just joining the UNM community, and where you think institutional change might still be needed or useful.
The question is asking me to reflect on the institutional context of being able to do this kind of research and scholarship within a university. And again, you put it much more eloquently, but essentially what it took to get here. And there are people in the audience who have been really central in this effort, so jump in and correct me and adjust and fix stuff that I get wrong. When I got here, as I said, my approach to research, I didn't exactly have an articulated framework, but I knew I wanted to do community-based work, and I knew that I wasn't particularly interested in traditional academic scholarship. And my colleagues, bless their hearts, didn't say, okay, well, you don't pass your third-year review. And they gave me tenure, right? So within the School of Architecture and Planning, I must say that it's been growing, and it's been more carefully and thoroughly articulated, but this has been a welcome place for this kind of research. I think that the university as a whole, as diverse and complicated as it is, has taken a longer time, I'm seeing some heads nodding, to get there. When I was coming up for tenure, I was told, you can do these professional reports, but we have to be able to prove that you know how to do real scholarship. And so I took some time off, and I wrote a bunch of articles so that I could prove. And I said that I was going to keep doing that. I knew that once I had tenure, I probably wasn't going to. But that was, and I still think in many units on campus, that is still the norm. That articulating how do you assess the quality and impact of community-engaged research means completely throwing out the window all of those norms and practices that we've gotten in the habit of saying, this is a high-impact journal. Well, a chart on a flip chart is not a high-impact journal, but it may get actually used more than, well, okay, that's snide, I'm going to take that back. I do think, and I really want to thank the central administration for making this a thing, right? For taking this seriously, for talking about how to revise and improve tenure and promotion guidelines so that it not only recognizes that there are such things as community-engaged research, but gives guidance on how to assess it in tenure and promotion. And I know tenure and promotion isn't the only way that a university encourages or supports certain kinds of research, but it's really important, and I think it's an exemplar. And so, I'm looking at people in the audience who are part of this. Thank you, thank you, thank you for moving this forward. It's very heartening. Yes.
You showed a slide with a number of different community organizing structures, community-based organizations, nonprofits, government. I'm interested in your thoughts on social enterprise and/or corporations and what role they might have in community action.
So do you want that slide or that slide?
No, it was the other one.
This one? Okay. The question was, given this list, what do I think of the of social enterprise and other for-profit and commercial activities in this process? I think it's really critically important, and I probably should have mentioned it in my list. I think that the idea, John Friedman has this thing, he distinguishes between life space and economic space, and I disagree with him because I don't think there's a distinction between the two. I think we live in both spaces simultaneously. But we've had a tendency, for good reason, we live in an advanced capitalist and industrial global economy in which our positions within that economy are often subordinated, we are often oppressed and exploited, and the idea of actually becoming an entrepreneur sort of feels kind of weird because you're joining the bad guys. And the recent explosion of both research and practice in social entrepreneurship and the triple bottom line, the idea that there are, yes, you've got to have a financial bottom line. Livelihood is important. We're not all trying to be monks with a vow of poverty here. Subsistence is important. But also the environmental bottom line and the social bottom line, that it is possible to bring all of those things together. I do think that there's some contradictions in that. And I think we need to be really careful not to, I don't know what the social entrepreneur equivalent of greenwashing would be, but not to pretend to be meeting those goals, but doing the same old kind of entrepreneurial development. Certainly within local economic development, the idea of developing a social entrepreneurship-based economy is one of the best ways that I can think of to develop that self-determination and autonomy with a substantial livelihood and a lack of dependence on shifting and often oppressive economic structures. That's a really great question. Thanks, Eduardo. Are we okay? Okay, I think I'm supposed to sit down now. Thank you.
We have time for more questions if anybody has any more questions. Okay. Well, thank you, Claudia, for a captivating lecture. We all live in the poorest state in the nation, and it's great to learn about the best practices that we can use to improve our communities, whether they're rural and urban, and it was really great to learn about this. My name is Gabriel Lopez. I'm the Vice President for Research here at University of New Mexico. And even though I've worked here for almost 2 decades, I went away for a while and I came back as VPR. And I'm not entirely familiar with all of the context for the institutional commitment that led up to this lecture series, but I do know that there were certain people involved. So I'd like to thank and recognize Associate Provost Virginia Scharf. She's very much involved in promotion and tenure over the last few years, and so I'm sure she had something to do with this. And next to her, holding a lovely child there, is Dr. Monica Cowell, who is from the Office of Community Engaged Learning and Research. And I'd like to thank her for continuing to push UNM to embrace and develop its commitment to community engaged research and this particular mission. And I'm sure that there's others, but as I said, I'm still a bit naive. You guys can correct me later. I do need to acknowledge and give thanks as well to the members of the university's Faculty Senate's Research Policy Committee, who kindly offer their time to select the lectures that are honored. I also want to thank my staff from the Office of Vice President for Research for their hard work in running a seamless event, and a very nice event this evening. So now I would like to invite Dr. Isaac to come forward and accept an award in a recognition for extraordinary work and contributions to UNM. I would like to personally thank her as well for her efforts in the advancement of community-engaged research. And we're supposed to pose with this thing.
Oh, okay.